Hello and welcome. This is Jerome Shaw, host of the Open Palm Podcast, motivator, meditator, coming at you with a message from the Seven Taoist Masters, a folk novel of China. And this powerful novel has timeless teachings from Taoist wisdom. And it's interesting that we're learning so much from these teachings, as well as learning about ways that we can be reaching a certain interdependence. How we can rise above, when push comes to shove, these feelings of lust. There's a passage in here that talks about a master that years later, a man named Hu Sheng Yang, or I'll say Hu Xiang Yang, had attained enlightenment. He returned to teach and had more than 100 students. One day, Shang Yang asked his students whether they had severed their attachments to worldly desires. All his students claimed to have done so. Hu Shangyang then said to him, "I shall give you a test. If you pass this test, then I shall give you advanced instructions in internal alchemy. This is the test. Each of you should take a plank of wood measuring 4 feet by 2 feet. Place it on your bed tonight and sleep beside it. Bring your plank with you when you report to me in the morning." The students went away, thinking that they would all pass such an easy test with flying colors. That night, each student went to sleep lying beside a wooden plank. In the middle of the night, as each one turned toward the plank, they felt something warm and soft. Groping around, he felt the body of a naked young woman. The students' sexual fires were aroused at once, and their generative energy drained out of their bodies. We can understand what that is. Each one's heart was full of desire for the body beside him. And even in sleep, he embraced it. Now, if you've ever had a wet dream, why did you have a wet dream? There was no one beside you. There was no one inside you. But you had a nocturnal emission. Good question. On awakening the next morning, the student saw that they were hugging the wooden planks. They sat up bewildered. But from outside the dormitory, the teacher's bell was heard. Summoning them to the instruction hall, the students hurriedly filed into the hall with their planks. Hu Shangyang ordered each of them to show the wooden plank. The first student on the line was a man 76 years of age. Hu Shangyang looked at him and said, "At your age, you still cling to sexual desires?" The old man said,
"Sir, how do you know that I have not severed my ties to sexual craving?"
Hu Shangyang replied, "Look at your plank. There are stains of your semen on it. Your sexual desires were roused when you felt a naked body next to you. And with that, your generative energy was drained." The man hung his head in shame and walked back to the back of the room. Hu Shangyang then said, "If there is anyone whose plank has no stain of seminal fluid, let him step up." There was a long silence. The students did not dare to step forward, because they then examined their planks and found them to be stained with their involuntary emissions. Only one person in the middle of the line stepped forward to present his plank to the master. Hu Shangyang said, "The desire for sex is strong for the typical person. You seemed to have tamed this desire. How did you manage to do it?" The young man replied, "Sir, I learned abstinence by overexposure." Hu Shangyang said, "How so?" The student said, "Most people know that their desires will ultimately lead to harm. However, they do not acknowledge the danger until they have tasted it. Once one has experienced the adverse consequences of sexual craving, then one will avoid it like the plague. As time goes on, the body strengthens itself through abstinence, and the craving stops long after the fear is gone. When I was an adolescent, I could not control my sexual craving. I frequented the brothels and lay with a woman every night. As a result, after a few years, my body was drained of energy and my mind was stripped of clarity. I almost died because I could not resist the temptation of sex. After that, I learned my lesson. I thought about my past experiences and saw that I had not really been happy when I was in the brothels. Ladies, women come and go. I made love to them, but I did not know who they were, and they did not care who I was. This went on continually, just as day follows night, and I began to see the emptiness of sexual craving. Sir, I am no longer attached to sexual desire because I have experienced it and have suffered the consequences of my indulgence and have seen the emptiness in the endless repetition of lovemaking. Hu Shangyang nodded his head and said to him, "You are the only student who is ready to receive the advanced teachings. The rest of the people need more work in preparing their foundations." It was said that the student received the transmission of the teachings of the Tao from Hu Shangyang and eventually attained enlightenment. Thus, the sages have said that in order to dissolve a desire, one must see its emptiness. Now, it's interesting that when I read this, it allowed me to see that I was able to do the same thing with food and the energy that it brings and the mood, right? To be able to find that energy within wasn't the place that I necessarily would begin. But there are times when one might be inclined to see the emptiness of an addiction by witnessing their very own affliction. Instead of putting themselves in a sort of restriction, they let it all out and receive a benediction. You are able to find the fact within the fiction. You're able to rise. And it is no surprise how you start to energize and revitalize the vessel when you let go of the fight and stop trying to wrestle. Wrestling with the energies of guilt and shame can put so much baggage on your shoulders. And as you saw from this example, it knows no age. You can deal with this well until you're older. but you can find salvation and a higher vibration by bringing certain desires to their kind of culmination, to where the buildup is so immense, there is an intense frustration, and you realize there's nowhere left to go. You understand in your hands, there's no pleasure left to know, right? So what do you have to show for this? Where else could you go for this, right? You realize that you can go back within you. Some people don't, until they continue. So in a roundabout, in a paradoxical way, you can be able to say, hey, I've been there, I've done that. I got the t-shirt. I know where it leads. I know how that works. I don't have to go off, be a werewolf, be berserk, right? I've already felt that. I know all of the perks. And I also know the pain. I know how deep it hurts. So I'd rather build myself to feel my energy work instead of having it leave. I'd rather be free. This is a choice that has been given to you and to me. But it is up to you to use it. You may continue to lose it, but as long as you don't abuse it, you will see how you can choose it. Choose yourself, time and time again. Continue to shine, and much love, my friend.